Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what can really only be described as a slow-motion heist happening right in front of us. It's a heist that is causing massive disruptions across global markets. We're talking about the 2026 memory crisis. You see, behind all the flashy headlines about AI breakthroughs, there's a fundamental, structural resource grab going on. Artificial intelligence is incredibly hungry, and right now, it's devouring the exact digital building blocks that literally every other industry relies on just to function.
Okay, let's jump right into the immediate damage here. 60% plus. That is the massive price jump we've already seen in 2025 for standard DRAM. You know, that's the regular memory your smartphone, your laptop, and your smart appliances use every day. A spike like this right out of the gate, that tells us the fundamental economics of the memory supply chain haven't just shifted, they've been completely fractured.
And honestly, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Our data points to an additional expected price surge of 30 to 40% on top of that as we head into 2026. When you see compounding, explosive price hikes like this, it points to a massive structural deficit in the market. Usually, semiconductor markets have these predictable ebbs and flows, right? But these numbers prove for sure that we are not in a normal, temporary market cycle.
So what's actually happening under the hood? Well, this is a classic bottleneck. It's a structural shift where the explosive AI-driven demand for high-bandwidth memory, or HBM, is creating a systemic shortage of standard DRAM, like DDR5 and LPDDR. The manufacturers are fundamentally rerouting their production lines to feed AI's insatiable appetite. It's a temporary dip. Actually, scratch that. It's not a temporary dip at all. It is a permanent structural transformation of what is being manufactured and why.
The core physical limitation driving this entire crisis is what's called the wafer penalty. Producing just one single high-bandwidth memory wafer means you have to sacrifice the production of multiple standard memory wafers. HBM is just incredibly complex to package and produce. So every single time a manufacturer decides, hey, let's build memory for an AI data center, they are effectively draining a disproportionate amount of global capacity for everyone else.
To really put the speed of this cannibalization into perspective, high-bandwidth memory production is growing at a staggering 70% year-over-year clip. It already eats up to 25% of total DRAM wafer production. AI is basically consuming the supply lines faster than anyone predicted, completely starving out the conventional memory market in the process.
Section 1. The Accomplices. Inside the DRAM oligopoly.
The extreme market concentration we're dealing with here is pretty staggering. As this infographic highlights, just 3 giant corporations control over 90% of the global DRAM market. You've got Samsung sitting at 38%, SK Hynix at 29%, and Micron at 22%. Everyone else in the world is fighting over that tiny 11% sliver. This oligopoly essentially dictates the global flow of digital memory, which creates an incredibly high systemic risk for everyone.
Breaking down how these players are positioning themselves to capture the massive 3 to 5 times higher profit margins of AI memory reveals some very distinct strategies. Samsung is playing the scale leader, leveraging massive investments like a $17 billion-plus fab in Texas and planning a 50% capacity increase in HBM for 2026. SK Hynix, they're the AI gold standard, dominating the advanced HBM4 market. In fact, their HBM capacity for 2026 is entirely sold out. And finally, Micron represents U.S. sovereignty, stepping away from the consumer market to focus heavily on enterprise, backed by over $6 billion in U.S. CHIPS Act funding.
Because of those incredibly high AI profit margins, the shift is absolute. By some estimates, up to 93% of combined production capacity is converting directly to HBM. Just let that sink in for a second. The production of standard memory isn't just taking a backseat here, it is practically being abandoned by the oligopoly in favor of the AI gold rush.
Now, of course, an oligopoly pivoting this aggressively introduces some major systemic risks. First off, there's the complete sellout of the 2026 HBM supply, meaning no new players can even buy in if they wanted to. Second, this extreme concentration of power has led to active antitrust lawsuits and price-fixing allegations, which is something we are tracking objectively as part of the broader industry tension. And third, having only 3 main suppliers creates severe vulnerability to single-point supply chain failures. If one goes down, everybody feels it.
Section 2. The Victims. Who gets hurt by the shortage?
The disparity in market power here is incredibly stark. Look at this demand breakdown. Data centers, driven largely by these heavy AI workloads, are swallowing up roughly 70% of global memory demand. Contrast that massive slice with the tiny 5% representing the entire automotive industry. When memory manufacturers decide who gets priority,
The volume and the sheer margins of that data center slice are going to win every single time. It's a really cruel irony. Data centers enjoy total priority access, with supply completely sold out years ahead. Meanwhile, the automotive sector, which fundamentally uses vastly less memory in total, is out there suffering devastating 70 to 100% price surges and dealing with halted production lines. They simply aren't a priority for the memory makers anymore.
And remember, modern cars aren't just vehicles anymore. They are literally servers on wheels. They require heavy, reliable memory for advanced driver assistance, infotainment, and over-the-air updates. But the standard DDR4 memory they heavily rely on, that's facing a full phase-out by 2028. We're already seeing Tesla issue warnings about supply impacts, and traditional giants like GM and Ford are facing over $1 billion in additional, unexpected costs. It's a truly staggering financial hit for legacy automakers.
And it's not just cars taking the hit. The collateral damage is spreading fast. Industrial automation, think advanced robotics and smart factories, is officially being delayed. Edge computing and Internet of Things devices are being forced to completely re-engineer into complex DRAM-less architectures. They literally have to innovate their way around the memory shortage just to survive the squeeze.
Section 3. The Escape Plan. How hyperscalers survive.
So while traditional industries are left scrambling, the biggest tech giants aren't just waiting around. Their first tactic? Brute financial force. Companies like Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft are using their immense capital to lock down future capacity before it even exists. They're executing multi-year long-term contracts, writing massive prepayments, and signing these aggressive take-or-pay deals. This completely drains the open market, actively starving smaller industries of any remaining memory allocation.
But they're also innovating to reduce their reliance on the oligopoly entirely. Big tech is vertically integrating by building their own custom silicon, specifically optimized to require less traditional memory. Meta has their MTIA chips, Amazon is heavily deploying Trainium and Inferentia, Google has their famous tensor processing units, and Microsoft is rolling out Maya. They are quite literally building their own hardware ecosystems to bypass the bottleneck altogether.
On top of that, they're attacking the problem through software mitigations. They're developing better caching and focusing a lot on smaller language models that just require less memory overhead. They're implementing aggressive model compression techniques. And they're shifting to cheaper storage by using disaggregated inference, which is basically a really clever way of swapping out ultra-expensive high-bandwidth memory for much cheaper NAND storage wherever possible.
Section 4. The Geopolitical Game. Memory as a Strategic Asset.
Memory isn't just a commodity anymore, it's a matter of national security. Governments around the world are scrambling to ensure supply chain resilience. The U.S. CHIPS Act is heavily fortifying Micron to ensure stateside production. At the same time, we still see the enduring, massive dominance of South Korean tech giants Samsung and SK Hynix. Meanwhile, China's CXMT is quietly but steadily growing to about an 8% market share. And all of this is constantly underscored by the ongoing geopolitical exposure risks centered right around Taiwan and Korea.
So when does this end? Well, the crucial point here is the delay in relief. The bottleneck horizon stretches out for years. In 2026, HBM is completely sold out globally. By 2027, crippling shortages will still persist because new multi-billion-dollar semiconductor fabs take years to slowly ramp up. And by 2028, we hit the full phase-out of the legacy DDR4 memory that industries like automotive so desperately rely on today.
Memory now fundamentally dictates the pace of global digital transformation. The AI giants definitely have the capital to build their own lifeboats, but what about the rest of the economy? The real question we need to ask is, who will survive the structural squeeze when the AI hype eventually cools down? It's a fascinating and absolutely critical shift in tech economics. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.